What's up, everybody? Nick here. I hope you're having a fantastic week. You may notice I'm wearing a different hat today. This is from my collaboration with Nick Bear. If you haven't seen that on my other channel, I'll link it right here and I'll also link it at the end of this video. But I went down to Austin, Texas to visit world-famous YouTuber Nick Bear, owner of Bear Performance Supplements, and we had an awesome head-to-head matchup in about a dozen events, but one in particular was the 100-meter all-out drag race in the loading dock behind his beautiful HQ. And I employed a tactic that I've used many times to win that race. And I want to talk to you guys today about how you can win any race using basically one of two tactics. And so that's the topic of today's video, because I know a lot of you out there, you want to win races, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I really this is going to oversimplify it, but I think it will illustrate a point. There's obviously a kind of a spectrum of how races unfold. But really, I break it down into two different types of races: time trials and tactical races, or sit and kick races. Now, if you're running the 100 or the 200, the 400, any sprint race, any race where you stay in your own lane, really in that case we're talking about time trialing, right? We're racing the clock. We're running as fast as we can in the 100, the 200, the 400. There is a little bit of pacing we need to do, but there's not a lot of tactics, right? Because we're staying in lanes, we don't have bodies we have to get around. It is a time trial. Now, you can also have time trialing like events in longer distances. Let's say we break from our lanes, the 8, the mile, 1500 if you run, metrics, 5K, 10K. In these races, tactics really come into play. And the shorter the event, the more chaotic it gets, right? We're talking middle distance racing, the 800 and the 1500. Those races are all about tactics, because the slightest error, bumping somebody or running up on somebody's heels, can cost us half a second to a second, and that can be the difference between winning and losing a race. So in those longer races, they can still be time trials. A perfect example of this is the 2012 Olympic final, a race that I was in where I was really just running against the clock because it was so spread out. When you have a guy like David Rudisha who says to the field, "I'm going for a world record, I'm going to try to lead this wire to wire," that is a time trial situation, right? David Rudisha got out front and never ever gave up the lead. Now, if you're the class of the field, if you're David Rudisha, or if you're, at the high school level, I see this all the time, when an athlete is truly the class of the field, I think it's a very predictable way to win, because you are literally running against yourself. You're running against the clock, and your competitors are so far behind you, you don't really need to worry about them too much, so long as you're the class of the field and you can run away from them. Now, if you're not the class of the field, if it's a really competitive race, now all of a sudden we're talking about tactics. And to win any single race, even a race in which you may not be the fastest in the race, suddenly sitting and kicking becomes the preferred method. Now, it takes more energy to lead mentally, it takes more energy to lead physically, so I always liked this position right off the leader's shoulder. Now, a great example of this is when I won the 2013 Diamond League race in London, where I was racing Dwayne Solomon, who had beat me just weeks earlier using a time trialing technique, where he led wire to wire in that event, and I couldn't keep up with him, I couldn't catch him. 2 weeks later, different race, I was a little bit sharper, he was maybe a little tired coming off that series at the US Championships, and I was able to sit on him for 700 meters and then kick him down the home stretch. Now, in that scenario, that was a truly sit and kick example by me, the Bison, knowing that I couldn't get around Dwayne, or I maybe only had one chance to get around Dwayne. Had I utilized that sit and kick strategy and tried to kick down the back stretch, it would have been a different story. I want to stay glued to the leader's outside shoulder as long as I can until I whip off that last turn, I see the finish line, and then I basically, I like to think about pressing the turbo button on a remote controller. I press the turbo button, I dump everything I got into the last 100 meters, and then it is what it is. Now, if you guys are thinking, I feel like I've heard this from Nick before, I call it the Centrowitz position, because if you watch Matt Centrowitz, he almost never leads from the gun, all right? He's content to run his own race in the pack. He gets cycled through the pack sometimes as people get excited and are jostling around. But when it comes time to really wind up that last lap, almost invariably, I think including, I'll have to go back and rewatch it, but including when he won his Olympic medal, When push comes to shove, when it's time to really start going, he's up front, he's on the leader's shoulders, he's in that lethal striking position so that when the time comes, when he smells blood in the water, he whips around, he moves into first place, and he kicks for the finish line, and he never gives up. So I think that does a really good job of kind of clarifying how you should approach your race. Are you the class of the field? Then try to run away from everybody. If you're not the class of the field, don't be afraid to sit and kick. Don't be afraid to sit on the leader's shoulder or maybe even 2 or 3 spots back, but make sure you're not buried in on that rail. That's called being boxed in. So you're outside of lane 1 and you in fact are controlling the race because you get to choose who comes around your shoulder in lane 2 or at what moment do you decide to strike and get around the leader. That's my favorite place to be, but I was always a sit and kicker, and in fact, as you guys saw in that race versus Nick Bear, even in 100, I sat on him for about 80 meters, hit the turbo button, moved around him, and ultimately came home with the win in that 100-meter drag race. Now, last tip for winning any race, you probably already know where I'm going with this, choose the right pair of shoes. Sprint spikes make a difference in the sprinting events. Mid-distance spikes make a difference in the mid-distance events. You know, and a great pair of distance shoes or even road racing flats when you're road racing. Shoes are so critical if you want to win any race. And that's why I partnered with Running Warehouse, so that I give away a pair of shoes to one of my Instagram followers every single week. They have an incredible selection, including spikes. All you have to do to enter in to win one of these giveaways is follow me on Instagram at Nick Symmonds. And I literally go through in the comment section and randomly pick one follower each week. And this week's winner is Luis Montoya, an electronics engineer and a runner, a photographer. I love this guy. Definitely a hard worker. And Luis, I'm going to DM you right now and you're going to be able to go to Running Warehouse and pick any pair of shoes you want. We're doing this every week through the end of 2021, so lots more chances to win. But right now, I need you guys to do me a favor. Go to the description below and watch that battle. Me versus Nick Bear in a game of fitness horse in his gym. It came down to the wire. And if you guys can get that video to 1 million views in the first 30 days, I'm giving away $1,000 cash to one of my subscribers on that channel. So go watch that video, share it with your friends. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next week.